Okay, guys, we're going to continue to work on our interactive PDF this week. So I've been working on mine, and I want to show you a couple ways that you can kind of add some techniques to an interactive PDF, especially where you can show a large amount of work without having to go page to page to page. So these are kind of buttons and techniques within a page. So I'm going to start with this one, and it looks like a mess, but let me show you how this previews. I added this page because I wanted to let you know how hide and show buttons work, but also because for this designer, Alvin Lustig, he died at 40 and he was blind. So it's a pretty good opportunity for something like this, a timeline. So this is what it looks like when it's active. There's copy sitting here when the page pulls up. It's just sitting there and you can read about his life in a nutshell. Then each of these has a rollover with a circle, and when you click on them, suddenly that is gone, and what I see instead is copy about the beginning of his life. So this is when he was born and his early life. Then when I click on 1935, that is gone, and there's information about how he went to Art Center, setting up his studio in Los Angeles and stuff. Then when I click on 1940, that's gone and this appears. This is an image and copy about his career in the 1940s. And then when I click on 1955, unfortunately, that's where he dies. All that copy is there, but it's hidden and revealed according to these buttons. Each one has the power to hide some of the content and show some of the other content. So let me show you how that works. So the first thing you have to do is you have to set up your buttons. So you could organize this as a timeline like I have, or you could even organize it by content. So for example, if you're doing Saul Bass, you could put a button that says movie posters, a button that says logos, a button that says typography, kind of. This is time now. You've made a zine and it's time to dive deeper. That's what I've done with Alvin Lustig, and I used ChatGPT to do it. For example, when I did the copy about 1915, I figured out it's about 65 words here. So for the one that is the placeholder, I said write 65 words that encapsulates Alvin Lustig's life from start to finish. And then on 1915, I write 65 words about the very beginning of Alvin Lustig's life. Then I said write 65 about his early career, and then his death. So I didn't write any of this, but it's pretty spot on because it's short little chunks, and ChatGPT did a good job with that. You could use it to show different periods in a person's life. You could use it to show different styles, depending on who you have. So this is how this works. Each of these is a group. And this is where it gets the most tricky working on this. The hardest thing about working with a hide and show button is that you have to pile the work on top of each other. So what I've done that might make things easier in general when you're laying out your page is I made this margin. So just by clicking somewhere on this page, I went to margins and columns, and you can see that it's not even even. It's 203 from the top, 187 from the bottom, and 112 from the sides. That's because I have content on the top and the bottom. So I wanted lots of space, and then I just want it centered on the side. So this helped me a lot, kind of lay down this information. So the first bit of information I have on him is just kind of about him generally. So I set this in here, and like I said, the margins help a lot. I've gone in and laid out each one at a time. So I put the visual on the left, copy on the right. That's the placeholder, because remember, you're going to click on these buttons, but what happens in the meantime? Pull up a blank page. So this is just information that's maybe just really general about the content you're about to show. So I got that all centered and set. It's off just a tiny bit off to the right. You can still fix it. Like I can double click, pull that over, and then I can absorb that widow. Perfect. So it's still held together as a group and as a button. So then each of these little groups, you do one at a time. So set your margins. When you do a hide and reveal, it's really nice if they kind of lay neatly on top of each other. It seems more kind of like magic. So this could be 3 visuals. You could have, like if you were doing punk rock posters, you might break it down by certain clubs or certain regions. How about some were typeset, some were hand-drawn. So you can break your content apart and then set up buttons with the content. So this is my first one. In this case, the buttons are really important what their name is, right? So the first thing you have to do, since it's a button, you always have to group everything. So it doesn't matter if you have 12 images on this page. If you group them all together, they become a button. Now I only have 2 images. I have the photo and the copy. I laid them out inside that margin, and then I grouped them, made it into a button called placeholder. That's all that you have to do for this one. I pull that aside, and then I start on the next one. Now this is my 1915. This is going to be the first one that comes up, and you can see it sits right in there. And I've made that a button, and I called it 1915. So you want to call it what corresponds with the button name, 1915. And so that's what I did with all of them. Now there's one more thing that you have to remember. The first one I put on here is going to be on here without any button triggering it. When you pull up on this page, this is just going to be sitting here. So we don't need this to be hidden until triggered by a button. The first placeholder image should not be hidden, but all the other ones are. So you have to kind of just keep track. And we'll take all of these now. Each one is named according to the button. So this one is named 1940, hidden until triggered. This one is named 1915, hidden until triggered. That's the only thing you have to set up for this, hidden until triggered. Otherwise, it would just be all of these showing, right? This one is called 1935, hidden until triggered. This one is called 1955, hidden until triggered. That's because none of these will show until the button is pushed. Whereas this one, the placeholder, is not hidden until triggered. It's sitting there. And then since I've lined these all up to the margins, most of them will do a pretty good job if I just center them with the align tool. So if I center it top to bottom and then center it that way, that should be good. So now I have each of these named as just the content they are related to the button. 1915, so whatever the button says, make that the name of the content. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what you have to do with the buttons. So these are each a button, and it's named what the button is plus the word button, and that is really important. It is easy to get tangled up with the action of show and hide buttons and forms. So what this button is doing, I'm calling it a 1915 button. On the action, when I hit plus, show and hide buttons and forms is one of the options. So that's what I'm going to put there. Now, here's where it gets tricky. This button is going to show and hide all these things. So all the buttons will always show. Okay, so the only thing I want to show is the content, 1915. I don't want 1940, 1955, or 1935 content to show. So I'm going to hide those. But what I do want is all the buttons to show. I don't want that placeholder copy to show. So that's what this button controls. What shows and what doesn't. So that means that you can put a button that on Saul Bass, for example, that says movie posters. When you click on that, it shows a page of movie posters. When you click on logos, it shows a page of logos and hides the movie posters. And when you click on, periodicals or magazines or some of the other things he designed, it hides the logos and the movie posters and only shows that. On 1935, for this button's job is to let all the buttons show and to hide all of the content except for 1935. And what's important here is that you've got to name things correctly. And I've messed up because of button 20. I don't know what button 20 is. It's likely to just be sitting there somewhere on accident. So I'm just going to ignore it. But you want everything named correctly. Okay, so it's important to do that. So on this one, 1935, I want 1935 to show, all the other content to be hidden, and all the other buttons to show. And of course, I also have a rollover. So my rollover, this circle turns red, and blocks out the lines behind it. And on normal state, the date has white, so it doesn't get the line going through it, and the circle has nothing, so you don't see a circle. You just see the date. But upon rollover, like that. So put it at normal. Now on 1940, you can kind of see now the pattern here, right? This is named 1940 button. Really important. All the buttons are showing. All the content is hidden except for 1940 is visible. 1955, same thing. All the buttons are visible, and it's X means that it just leaves it there. So I don't really understand the difference between an X and the I, but I always put it on the I. So we don't want placeholder content. We don't want 1935, 1940, or 1915, but we do want 1955 to show, and we want a rollover. These are not, none of these buttons are hidden until triggered. They're sitting there at all times. Hidden until triggered means that you do not see this content until a button triggers it. Okay, so that is show and hide, and it's a really nice way when you're trying to get a lot of content onto one page. And if you look up, I'm going to give you some links, but if you look up, there are some really tricky things you can do with hide and show. It used to be hide and reveal. Now it's show and hide, so I keep getting it confused. Okay, so look through your content, your designer, and find a way to set up a page like this. It doesn't have to be the same thing. It could be organized by any other classifications, but set it up so it has show and hide buttons. At least 3. And make sure you test it. Don't expect it to work right the first time. It might not even work right the 3rd time, but eventually you'll get it figured out. If not, let me know and I'll be able to help you. Okay, good luck.